Well, the mining industry is featured extensively in the headlines this week, with ArcelorMittal proposing to buy Imperial Crown Trading, the group that's been granted prospecting rights at Sishen Iron Ore. And after stopping Lonmin from selling any of the base metals it mines along with its platinum group metals, the Department of Mineral Resources backed down midweek and said it could continue sales apart from those in a small area of its Marikana project that have been granted to a little-known group called Keysha. So how does this provide security for mining companies that invest heavily in South Africa? Well, with more, we're joined now by Peter Leon. He's a mining rights lawyer with Webber Wentzel. Peter, thanks very much for coming in this afternoon.
You're welcome, Steve.
Lonmin has a bit of a reprieve. It can continue to mine and sell those base metals that it mines on the mine. But international investors must at this point be sitting up and taking notice and wondering what's going on down in South Africa.
Well, look, it's played very badly in the international media. If you look at the wire services, the Financial Times, Dow Jones, etc., in the last week, and that comes on top of the ArcelorMittal Kumba ICT scenario, which is also, I think, unhelpful for the mining industry. And really what this has done is inject a great deal of uncertainty in the industry at a time where the whole world economy still looks fairly volatile. And I think, what has happened in the last week with Lonmin and Keysha Investments shouldn't have happened the way it did. I mean, irrespective of the rights or wrongs of the situation, I think the Department of Mineral Resources should have dealt with the situation differently, rather than, this week on Tuesday, doing what they might have done last week on Wednesday before this whole thing blew up.
Peter, do you think it lies with the fact that there's just relatively unclear legislation? Previously, mining laws allowed companies to sell all mined products irrespective of what their primary product was. At the end of the day, do we need to see things like that being ironed out? And, obviously there's a lot of issues that come to the fore when it comes to this, because it's all about applying for the mining rights at the end of the day.
Well, you've got to take a step back, actually, because what happened is this new mining law, the Mineral Petroleum Resources Development Act, which came into force in 2004, put all privately owned mineral rights under state custodianship. So it took away, by really, I've always taken the view, an expropriation of all those common law old mineral rights, and created a system of state mining rights which had not existed before. Whereas under the old law, you could own the rights, and what the government gave you was an authorization to use them. Under the new law, all the rights are owned by the state, sort of de jure, by operation of law. And so you have a completely different system of administrative law imposed on what was a property law system based on real rights. And the mining industry, I think, made the best of a very difficult situation back in 2004 when this law came into force. But the reality is that they lost out. And what you now have is administrative discretion, a licensing system which is unclear and rather opaque, and all these other things brought into the equation.
Why didn't mining companies back in 2004, though, recognize that they had to apply for rights for each and every metal that they were mining on their properties?
A very good question. I mean, some companies were much more assiduous about protecting their rights than others. And I think you've seen in the course of the last week and in the ArcelorMittal situation.
Everybody rushing out to apply.
Yeah, but also, with the ArcelorMittal situation where they actually let their rights lapse, which, I does seem very odd.
Well, Peter, looking at the fact that we've been seeing already opened mines, functioning mines, and we're seeing other companies coming in and applying for those mineral rights. I mean, is that legal at the end of the day? It's quite interesting because it becomes even more complex as we head along.
Yeah, well, I think what's happened there is there's a lot of opportunistic behavior going on. And I think in the Kumba ICT situation, and it may also be in the situation with Holgun and Lonmin, but certainly the Kumba ICT situation, I think a lot of opportunistic behavior was going on where it appears, from what I have read and can gather, that that ICT were ahead of the game and knew over that famous weekend of May the 1st, 2009, when the public holiday took place, that ArcelorMittal hadn't applied to convert its share of the Sishen Iron Ore mine rights. Kumba had applied for that residual share, and somebody tipped them off and said, well, you go along and apply for a prospecting right. That sort of thing shouldn't happen, and I must tell you, it would not happen if we had a better system. And what I'm proposing are two things. One is that you actually take away all these powers from the Department of Mineral Resources and create an independent regulator staffed by experts. And obviously it would have to be adequately funded, but more importantly, as an interim step, we need to create some sort of mining cadastre system where you can know what people are applying for, what's been sought on an electronic real-time basis, rather than this paper-based, very opaque system which we have at the moment.
And of course, that also goes back to the Lonmin story, where Sivi Gandon, who used to be a director at Lonmin, is the head of the Gandon Group, which of course is the holding company for Keysha Investments, which has applied for those very rights at Lonmin's Marikana mine.
Well, look, I think there are a lot of corporate governance issues that need to be explained there. How is it that a director of a publicly listed company was able to apply for a prospecting right in respect of an area of which he was a director? And that is extraordinary.
As well, with Webber Iron Ore and Imperial Crown Trading, we also saw that overlap, which also creates more concerns when you look at that story.
Yeah, but in that particular situation, he's not going along and applying for a prospecting right over, in relation to an area that the company owns the mining rights. I think it is a different situation.
Well, Peter, you've laid out a couple of steps that you think should be taken that could clear up the whole situation. If those steps aren't taken, if the status quo is kept as it is at the moment, what are the risks for the South African mining sector?
Well, the basic risk, Stephen, is that people will stop investing here. I mean, mining companies will carry on investing here in respect of the assets that they have here. They'll obviously have to keep them going, because obviously South Africa is a very important mining destination. But exploration here by foreign exploration companies, particularly Canadian juniors who are at the forefront of this sort of activity, will just stop. I mean, mining at the end of the day is a high-risk, capital-intensive industry, and you absolutely have to have proper security of tenure. And you can't have a situation where things can change overnight, and the whole situation is so precarious.
What about, when it comes to BE rights as well, and BE compliancy for prospecting rights and exploration? Because there seems to be a bit of an inconsistency. Could you clarify for us?
Yes, sure. It's not really an inconsistency. The Act in relation to mining rights requires you, by virtue of the operation of the mining charter, which you have to read with the Mineral and Petroleum Resources Development Act, requires you to have 26% BE by 2014. In other words, you have to have given an undertaking which is enforceable against the company that you will be empowered by 2014. In relation to prospecting rights, the minister may impose that requirement on a company, so it's not mandatory. So that unfortunately is the opportunity for arbitrage, that some companies will be treated differently. I mean, arguably, prospecting rights shouldn't require any BE at all, because prospecting is a very high-risk stage of the mining game, and I'm not sure it's right to make prospecting companies be empowered at that stage.
Peter, thank you very much for your insights this afternoon.